There we go. Shalom to everybody. I'm Rabbi Rami Shapiro, and this is Your Superior Self.
Rabbi, thank you for taking the time. This is going to be a fantastic conversation.
I'm looking forward to it, Trey. So thanks for having me on the show.
Sure. So is it 36 books you've written?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow. 36 books. Standing back and, standing at the top of the mountain and looking back at your life, could you imagine yourself writing 36 books and doing what you're doing today?
I don't think I would have imagined the number, but ever since seventh grade, which was many decades ago, I wanted to be a writer. So, I was in the high school newspaper. At one of the universities I went to, I ran a section of that newspaper. I love writing, or maybe I hate writing, but I don't know which it is. It depends on how the writing is going. But this is what I've always wanted to do. And becoming a rabbi was just a part of that unfolding journey. But yeah, I always thought I'd end up, not necessarily 36 books, but, as an author.
Do you ever write fiction?
I tried writing fiction once, and no one believed it was fiction.
Really?
Yeah. The book is called Open Secrets. I was publishing with Random House at the time, and I wrote this. It was fiction, and I wrote this. It was fake letters from a fake Hasidic mystic rabbi to a fake person in the United States. I mean, the whole thing it seemed to me it was obviously fiction. And I wrote it to use in a class that I was going to teach. Somehow copies were made, but not by me. And a copy ended up on the desk of my editor at Random House. She called me up, very enthusiastic, and said, "Is this book true?" And I said, "Of course not. It makes no sense that it's true. It's fiction." And she said, "Then I don't want it." She hung up. Very abrupt. I mean, she's a lovely woman, but she was ticked off that it wasn't true. Eventually, it was picked up by a publishing house. It was published. They had to put, I forget the subtitle, but they made it clear right from the beginning it wasn't true. Didn't matter. People assumed it was true. Wow. I have a bunch of short stories in a Jewish collection of short stories that was published. And they were also stories about a Hasidic rabbi, though contemporary, but they were true stories about this guy I knew in Israel. And no one believed those. Really? So when I wrote fiction, people insisted it was fact. And when I wrote fact, they insisted it was fiction. So I just write, and hopefully I can make a living at it.
Oh, well, obviously you have. I love that space you go to when you're writing fiction. Maybe it's you go to that same space when you write anything, but tapping into that flow state, right? Like,
yeah, I think when I'm writing, I'm sort of channeling. I'm just typing in a sense. I don't know where the words are coming from. I don't know where the concepts are. I mean, if I stop and I think about it, I can say, oh, that comes from so-and-so, and I have footnotes. But when I'm writing, I am writing in the flow, and much of what I write turns out to be absolute crap. And then I get to do what I like even more, which is to rewrite. I love going back, whether it's my column in Spirituality and Health magazine, which I rewrite a dozen times, or any book that I'm working on. I love the process of rewriting. I can always find a better word. I can always make it clearer. I can always make it more simple. So writing is a challenge. Rewriting is, it's a real gift.
Really?
To me, yeah.
I find like rewriting is like it. I took a writing class and they were like, yeah, the rewriting is where the magic is. It's like that's the flow state. Like you can go in, you can weave in and out of the story and like fix things and kind of make it your own. I go over my stuff and it's like I get lost again, right? Like I go down a rabbit hole or I go down a tangent. Like I just create more stories into my main flow of theme, and then I find myself stuck at some point. I don't know if you're
that because you're writing fiction. Maybe it's different.
Yeah, maybe.
I wanted to write I mean, I appreciate what I write. I'm very happy being the nonfiction writer, but I always thought about, I'd love to write murder mysteries, create a character and write a series about that. And I took a workshop in mystery writing. We have a wonderful mystery writers conference in Nashville near where I live. So I went to the conference, I learned about it, and every time I sit down to figure out what I want to do, I know how the story's going to end, and then I'm bored. It's like, well, I don't want to write this. I know what happens. So I'm not entertaining myself. But when I do the nonfiction, I know what I want to say, but I never know how it's going to actually come out. And when I reread the books, which I don't usually do, but sometimes I have to read parts of it for something else, when I reread them, I always notice, oh, I could have made this simpler. My goal is to simplify these things as much as possible so that whether people agree or disagree, they're not confused. Oh, he said X, he meant X, I hate X. That's fine. Or he said X, he meant X, and I love X. That's also fine. But I don't want people to go, wait, what did he mean?
Yeah.
I'm writing for clarity and not to confuse.
Sure. Well, yeah, I've looked at some of your work, and I truly am amazed at the growth or the evolution of your writing. The one theme that I've been become attracted to is perennial wisdom, right? And I don't know if a lot of my audience members know what that is. Could you take a moment and kind of jump into that?
Sure. Perennial wisdom is a fourfold truth that's found at the mystic heart of every religion. And there's, like I said, four points. So point number one, everything, you and I, all sanctioned beings, but everything, even things that seem not sanctioned, like the computer or a lamp or a rock, everything in the universe is a happening of one dynamic process. You can call it God, you can call it Brahman. I usually use the word chiyut or chayut, which means aliveness in Hebrew. But there's just this one process and everything comes out of it, just like every wave coming out of a single ocean. That's point number one. We're all waves on this infinite ocean. Point number two, we humans have an innate capacity to awake to this aliveness. Maybe other animals do too, I don't know, but humans definitely have this capacity through a variety of contemplative practices. The third point is that when you awake to aliveness and you realize everything is the happening of God, you're called inwardly. You're not commanded on the outside. There is no external command. It's this internal understanding that you're here to be a blessing. This is the way Torah puts it in the book of Genesis in chapter 12, verse 3. You're here to be a blessing to all the families of the earth. You just sort of, that. And the way to do that is to live basically according to the golden rule. So you just have this, oh, I get it. You and I are part of the same dynamic happening. If I harm you, I harm me. If I harm anything, I'm harming us. And so not harming becomes the standard. It's just axiomatic. And then the fourth point is awakening to aliveness and being a blessing comprise the highest calling of every human being. So that's perennial wisdom.
Why do you think people have such a hard time with that, right? Like, why do they fall back into that big religion idea?
Because perennial wisdom puts the responsibility for action and awakening on your shoulders. Whereas, like you call it big religion, I like that term too, organized religion, big religion, like big pharma and big government. These are systems that are designed to tell you what to do. They're all about power and control. Whereas perennial wisdom is very liberating. There's no rabbi, minister, priest, imam, guru of any sort in perennial wisdom. There are teachers who understand the fourfold truth of perennial wisdom and can teach you different practices, but there's no hierarchy. There's no patriarchy, thank goodness. No one has control over you. It's your awakening to the reality that we're all part of the same happening. And then you're doing the best you can to be a blessing in every given situation. People don't like being responsible. There's a wonderful book by Erich Fromm written in the 40s called Escape from Freedom. And that's really what we want. We want to escape from freedom. We want to escape from responsibility. So we go to the church and the church says, okay, you must do X, Y, or Z. Or you go to the synagogue or, a legal system in Judaism. Is, okay, this is what you do in this situation. And all you have to do is follow the rules. You don't have to do any thinking about it. You just have to be subservient to the rules. And most importantly, from big religion's perspective, subservient to the rule makers. That is key. Religion is all about power and control. The thing we're talking about, and religion, by the way, just to riff on the topic of your podcast, religion is never about your superior self. Religion is all about keeping you in a very, I don't know if you want to say inferior self, that may not be accurate, but keep you in an egoic state that is fearful, anxious, alienated, and then they can sell you whatever it is they're trying to sell you. Every religion is a cure for a specific disease. I mean, for example, the disease of, I'm talking obviously broad brush, classic standard ideas of religion, but the disease of Christianity is, for most Christianities, original sin. The only cure for original sin is to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. The disease that Hinduism posits is the disease of avidya, ignorance. And the only thing that can cure ignorance is knowledge of, of the Vedas and knowledge of the Vedanta, knowledge of the Hindu philosophy, which will tell you the truth, and that will overcome your ignorance. In Judaism, the disease is exile. You're out of the garden. You're wandering around in search of the divine or something like that. And the mitzvot, the commandments, the practices of Judaism are designed to bring you back into contact with God. If you don't suffer from original sin, Christianity has nothing to say to you. I mean, just to go a little bit further on this and see if I can make it clear, the Southern Baptist Convention spends millions and millions of dollars every year trying to convert Jews. I've suggested to them that they should really just write a check, and someone's going to go, hey, I'll take the money and I'll convert. But they get very few converts. And the reason is original sin isn't the Jewish problem. I don't suffer from original sin. You can tell me I do, but that's like telling me I have a broken arm because you want to put it in a cast. I don't have a broken arm. If I did, I would go to you because you can put it in a cast and heal me. They have to sell you the disease. And if you don't have that disease, you don't want that religion. The superior self has no disease, as I, in my head, defining superior self, the self that's awake to its own divinity and the divinity of everything else. There is no alienation. There is no original sin. There's no ignorance when you're awake. All the things that religion tries to sell, and there's more than those three, but all the things that religion tries to sell aren't products the superior self has any need for.
How do we grow that seed, though, to become aware of that superior self, right? Like that's an innate and, inside. I think it's, for me, I get close to it in the heart center, right? Through meditation. But for you, how do you grow that seed?
It's the same. I mean, it's through practice. And again, for the way I would put it is you already are the superior self.
So is it just like a remembering almost?
It's a remembering. It's an awakening to what's really true. So I don't believe that you have a superior self that's different from mine. I think there's only one superior self, one divine reality, and it manifests in an infinite number of ways. So you are a unique manifestation of this divine happening, as am I, as is a turtle and a cow and an elephant and a tree. You are already that. In Hinduism, we would say tat tvam asi. you are that. You're already this superior self, but you've been misled, or you've forgotten, or the system from religion and from education and economics and the whole structure of society is, especially in the West, designed to keep you from knowing that, because they don't want you to be free. Capitalism does not really want free individuals. They want individuals who buy things to feed their distress and the distress of feeling alienated. So I buy something and I get that high of, okay, now I'm fine. And then the next day you have buyer's remorse, or you see a new commercial and you got to get, I'm a victim of this. I mean, I started with the early iPhone, whatever the first one was, and I now have iPhone 13, and I'm salivating for iPhone 14. I know it's going to be better. It's going to solve my problem of whatever my imagined problem is. But the superior self doesn't get caught up in that. So the system in which we live, religious, social, economic, is designed to keep you hungry, is designed to keep you diseased, right? But the superior self doesn't experience any of that.
Sure.
The way to awaken is through contemplative practice. And then you have to find practices that suit you. So I could tell you what I do. I don't recommend practices, but primarily for me, mantra, I'm just going to use the Hindu term because the Sanskrit term, because people know that, but reciting a sacred word or phrase is my primary practice, coupled with silent sitting. Now, the mantra I use, one is Sanskrit. I use three. One is a Sanskrit mantra. The other two are Hebrew mantras. And somehow, for me, the repetition of a word or phrase just quiets my mind, settles my body, and leaves me open to, I would say, reality with a capital R, or this chayut, this aliveness that is me, not in me, but that is me and everything else. It leaves me open to that. And then when I'm feeling centered like that, I shift to a silent practice where you're trying to hear, and trying is the wrong word, because you're not, if there's no effort. If there's effort, it's not going to work. It's an effortless listening. So I sit and I listen for what the Bible calls, in Hebrew, it's kol damama daka, the fragile voice of silence, or King James, the still small voice, that kind of thing. And it's not a metaphor. What you hear, what I hear anyway, is this kind of hum. And it's not like tinnitus coming from inside your head. It's this, I don't know, now it sounds very new agey, but it's this cosmic hum of the universe. In Hinduism, it's called nada yoga, sound yoga. And some of my Hindu teachers say it's the sound of Om, but that's not what I hear. I can't produce the sound that I hear with my vocal cords, but there is a sound, and the sound permeates everything. And you just sit in the sound, attend to the sound. And whatever is blocking your sense of the superior self, being one with the divine, or being the divine itself, simply falls away. And there's a knowing of this divinity that is you and everything else. And then, of course, it passes, and you run to the Apple store to see if the iPhone 14 is
out. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever experienced it where maybe you've had thoughts pop in to your mind, right? Or
Sure.
a voice that sounds like your voice, but it's not your voice because you're saying things that that you wouldn't say. I've experienced that. But the melting away of the I, or the small I, and then the melding almost with the larger consciousness, I've yet to experience that. I mean, I used to try very hard to get there. Now I just kind of, there is a small knowing just through my meditation, and I would say like small awakening or remembering rather with perennial wisdom of that I'm nurturing that feeling. And the more that I do that, the more that I have conversations like this and just read literature that reminds me of that. It just feels like truth to me. Like I don't have to try to explain it. It just seems like it's true.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same way. I don't hear, you're hearing a voice. That's your voice. I don't hear my voice. I have two experiences besides hearing that hum and just resting in that. I have an experience multiple times of hearing, again, I keep going back to the Bible, what the Bible calls, or the rabbis call, ancient rabbis call a bat kol, literally means daughter's voice, bat being daughter, like bat mitzvah, and kol means voice. And it refers to the divine voice. When the ancient rabbis heard the voice of God, they didn't, even though they were completely patriarchal civilization, when they heard the voice of God and when they speak of experiencing the presence of God, they go to feminine language. So they speak of the daughter's voice and Shekhinah, which is feminine noun for the presence of God. So it's very much a feminine, whatever that might mean to someone, experience. I've heard the bat kol, the daughter's voice. Now it sounds strange to talk about it, but I recognize this voice as the voice of the Divine Mother. And I've experienced her as Shekhinah, the presence of God, as Chachma, the wisdom of God, Sophia, the wisdom of God, as Kali in the Hindu tradition, as Mary, Theotokos, Mary, the Mother of God, in the Christian, especially Catholic traditions. It's always, to me, the form is different. The voice is the same. The divine feminine energy is the same. It's the mother with 1,000 faces, sort of kind of thing. And in that setting, what I think is happening is that my unconscious is translating the nameless, fragile voice of silence into a form that I can, the formless into a form to whom I can relate. So I think I'm doing this. I'm not saying God is a woman. I don't think God is gendered, but I experience the bat kol. I experience a feminine presence, a feminine voice, because maybe that's what I need to experience given my psychology. I don't know. Mm-hmm. The other experience I've had speaks to what you said a moment ago, that you've never had this experience of selflessness. It sounds like you were saying.
Yeah.
And the reason you haven't is because you can't. In that moment, you need an I to have an experience. And in that moment, there is no I. The first name in the Hebrew Bible that God reveals is Ehiyah, which means I am. And from the mystical tradition, there's only one I in the universe. That's the divine. And you and I are variations of that I. To hear or to be awake with as the Ehiyah that's revealed in the Bible, you have got to be gone. You have got to disappear. So I'm gonna try to elaborate on this, and if it's too wonky, just stop me. Mm-hmm. But in the Hebrew, one of the names, when you speak of yourself, first person singular, the Hebrew is ani, A-N-I, use English letters. When you talk about emptiness, the word is A-I-N. And the ancient rabbis, the mystics, said, look, it's made up of the same letters. A-N-I is first person singular. A-I-N is this nothingness that, beyond all concept. but it's made of the same three letters. How does it differ? And the way they say it differs is where the I is. So the I, which in Hebrew is the letter Yud, which stands for conscious knowing, when your consciousness is outwardly projected, ANI, you see the world around you, and that seeing creates a sense of a seer. I see you, therefore there's an I that's seeing you. So the self and other arise together, like in a Buddhist tradition of dependent co-origination. But when I take that I, that Yud, that knowing, and I turn it inward, so I go from ANI to AIN, I get nothing. Rami's gone, Trey is gone. And there may be awareness. Now, I've had the experience of being completely in the Heart Sutra of the Buddhist tradition. The final Heart Sutra is translated into all kinds of languages, but the last line is always in Sanskrit. And the last line is gate, gate, para gate, parasam gate, bodhi svaha, which translates as gate, gate, gone, gone, para gate, really gone, parasam gate, gone beyond the concept of gone. And then it says bodhi, wisdom, svaha, wow. When you're empty of all self, well, period. When you're empty of all self, then this wisdom happens, but you're not there. You're not there to go, hey, I got it. Because if you can say, hey, I got it, you don't have it. So you may, this is a long way of getting back to what you said and saying you may have had the experience, but you didn't have it consciously because you can't have it consciously. Anyone who says, I am enlightened, run for the hills, right? Because that's ego projection. Anyone who says, I've had an enlightenment experience, I'd also run for the hills. Anyone who says, I don't know what happened, I wasn't there, well, I want to talk to that person some more.
That makes sense, right?
Well, it makes sense to me.
It makes
Whether
sense
it really
to me
makes sense, I don't know.
Well, it does, because now that I think about it, there are times where there is an awareness, like you'll get into this deep meditative state or whatever brain state, and I'll start seeing images, or I'll start seeing like pictures of like a face or something like that, and I'll just see like little weird objects floating by, but I'm not like thinking as Trey. I'm just kind of aware. So like I can correlate what you just said with that experience of awareness. Like Trey's not there, but there is an awareness.
I was in a situation once. I have a teacher, I have lots of teachers, but this guy is this wonderful Indian teacher. I won't, well, his name is Prasanna. He never taught formally. He's just an Indian teacher in the Ramana Maharshi school. And he doesn't give classes, he doesn't do seminars, but I met him. I won't have to go into how I did that. But anyway, I met him and I started just hanging out with him whenever I could. And I was in his living room one time, a few years ago, and he's asking about my spiritual practice. And we had been talking about the teachings of Ramana Maharshi. And Ramana Maharshi teaches the practice of self-inquiry, where you follow a thought and you say, well, who's thinking that thought? Or you notice you're feeling whatever you're feeling, and you ask yourself, who's feeling that? And when you ask honestly, you always get a sense of, wait, there's a me that is aware of my anger, but that isn't angry. And then I try to look for that me, and I don't see it. And then I'm seeing a me that's looking for that other me that isn't angry, that's looking at the me that is angry. It's this, reduction kind of thing. But anyway, so I said to him, well, one of the practices I do is self-inquiry. I ask, who am I? It was just throwaway line. We were just chatting. And then he looks at me and he says, are you? I have no idea what that meant, but at the instant he said it, I wasn't. Rami was gone. Just the way you said, though, I was aware of the room. There was a friend there. I couldn't name him, but I saw him. I saw Prasanna. I didn't have a name for him. I just saw him. I saw the chairs. I saw the couch. I saw the room. Everything was clear, vivid, but not labeled. So I was aware, but but I didn't know I was aware. There was no Rami whatsoever. There was awareness, but no awarer. I could see, but there was no seer. And so, I always think these things are meaningful experiences. When I come back to my normal waking state, I imagine, I have the conceit that I tapped into this infinite I that is beyond labeling for a second, however long it lasted, I don't know. And then I came back to Rami again. So I think everyone has this potential. Some people need to go through meditation or yoga or chanting, or kirtan is another powerful practice. There are so many practices because there are so many people who resonate to different things. So no one can tell you, oh, you must do X. That's the only way. If that's your way, it'll be fine. But if it isn't your way, well, don't feel you failed. Try another way. So there are lots of practices because there are lots of people seeking. But in the end, regardless of the practice you choose, I think it's a matter of grace, not a willed grace that there's a God out there somewhere who says, I will now bestow a moment of awareness on Rami. I mean, I don't believe that at all. What I mean when I say it's a matter of grace is it's not under your control. You can prime the pump, you can do the practice, you can be really devoted to your yoga or to whatever else you're doing. But the union that yoga promises, that's not yours to control. First of all, the union is always present. What yoga can do is bring you in alignment with what's already true. But forcing that is not going to help. But holding a pose comfortably can put you in a receptive state that allows you to realize what was true before you walked onto the mat. And that is you and the divine are one.
I love that. I think for me, it was just like being ignorant to that receptivity, really. Like what you just described, like sitting on the mat, opening yourself up, being receptive to the universe. But we're so used to living in these bodies of the five senses that we expect something to happen, or to hear something, or to feel something, or to taste something, or touch. Like it takes us a little bit to deprogram from this, right? And really experience things on an intuitive level.
Yeah, and then I think it includes the body, though. I don't think this is a Gnostic kind of thing where the body is the problem. I don't think the body is the problem. I think the mind is the problem. I think we've been trained to have a problem that we really don't have. So it's the insistence. I mean, in a sense, and it sounds a little silly, but the problem is that what keeps me from being enlightened, and by enlightened, I just mean being aware of everything as the divine. What keeps me from that awareness is my insistence that I don't have that awareness. As soon as I stop blocking myself, the natural awareness is going to arise, and it arises through the senses. It includes the senses. It transcends them, maybe, but it's going to be. I think the term is polymorphous. Your entire body is alive to this thing. That's why there's tantric sexual practices, and there's. I mean, if the practice denigrates the body, something's wrong with the practice.
Sure. Well, I think there's also like trauma, going back, like clearing the trauma out of your body, right? Like I feel like the more that you're resonant with that vibrationally, right, with the mind, body, and spirit, right? Like if you have a lot of trauma and your diet is piss poor, and you're numbing a lot of that with drugs and alcohol, like you're just not going to be able to tap into that, right? Like anything really. I mean, I'm so geared up on like clearing the body of like trauma right now, and not just like physical trauma, but like emotional traumas from my past, not necessarily from my parents, but from society, from sports, injuries, everything, just so that I can be the best antenna for consciousness that I can possibly be. What I mean, besides yoga, like, have you found anything for yourself that like clears that type of trauma out of your body?
I don't know, actually. I mean,
No.
I suspect there are traumas I'm aware of and many more traumas I'm not even, that are in my unconscious or subconscious. So I don't know how to answer that.
Mhm.
My physical practice, I mean, I've spent years doing yoga, but I can't even see my toes, let alone touch them. So I no longer do that. I mean, my primary practice is walking. I walk miles every day. I find that very, very liberating. But just to go back to what we were saying and taking it from a different, this trauma thing. I was once at a retreat, and there was this wonderful doctor, maybe a psychologist, psychiatrist, maybe retired by the time I met him, but he told this story about when he was an intern, and he said he interned at the psychiatric hospital, and I'm assuming the story is true. Well, let me put it this way: the story is true. The point he makes is true. Whether the story is factual or not, I don't know. It's his memory, but this is what he remembers. So he's interning at this psychiatric hospital, and he says they give him the hopeless patients because he's a newbie. They don't want to give him somebody who he could actually do some harm,
Yeah.
So they give him this kid who has been in and out of institutions his entire life. He's 16 years old. He's really, really caught up in depression. And he sits down with this kid, and I don't know what you're supposed to do. I don't know what the protocol is, but he was just sort of going by the seat of his pants. And he says to the kid, describe your depression. Now, this boy has been in and out of these institutions. He's talked to dozens of psychiatrists. He knows the patter, he knows what to say. Mm-hmm. This is how I feel, and this is what it is. And he's just going through all these things. I'm assuming accurately describing his depression, but he's running on, habit. And then the doctor says to him, is the you that is describing the depression depressed? Right. So the kid is describing himself as depressed, but the doctor wants to know, is the you that's describing the depressed you depressed? And the kid stops for a second and he says, no. And then the doctor says, I want to work with that kid, not the depressed kid. Let's work with the kid who isn't depressed, who's aware of depression, but isn't trapped in it. That's what we were talking about. That's Ramana Maharshi's approach. That's, being the I that is free from all of being the cosmic I, I guess, that's free from all the little I's problems. Mm-hmm. And, you can be aware of them. I can be aware of trauma, but the I that is aware isn't suffering from that trauma. So having to heal everything about us may be a distraction from awakening to the dimension of reality, that trauma is just a part of the game.
Sure. So just listening to you speak and the books that you've written, do you get, and you're a rabbi, do you ever get any blowback from members of your community about the philosophies?
No, nobody takes me seriously. Nobody worries about me that they're going to get upset about what I say. There are some people who read this stuff and they're moved by it in a positive way. And I suppose there are people who just can't stand it, but then they just don't read me anymore. When I first graduated from seminary in 1981, I knew, because all these ideas that I'm sharing with you, I had then, I knew that I couldn't do what most graduating rabbis do, and that's take an assistant job somewhere, learn the ropes, and then, after you've interned in a sense, move on and work on your own. I knew I couldn't do that because there was no rabbi that I knew of who was going to put up with my BS. So I ended up my plan was to start my own congregation. And it's a long story. I was in the Air Force then. I was a chaplain, and I met some people. They wanted to do it in Miami because that's where I was stationed. So I just sort of let people know that I was thinking about starting a congregation in South Florida. And there was a rabbi there, a very big, powerful rabbi there, who started traveling up and down the state, agitating his colleagues and soon to be my colleagues, not to let me come to Florida to do this
Wow.
kind of work. He just felt it was really anathema to Judaism. So there are people like that. He failed. I was there, and my congregation was so small and my focus was on my writing, and it didn't impact him or his congregation at all.
Mhm.
So there's no real blowback. If I was more famous and maybe something, or if I had a big denomination or something that would upset other people, maybe then. But I'm a small fish in a very large pond, and no one really cares what I do.
Oh,
Wouldn't it be
yeah,
better if I had said, "Oh my God, they're always after me, cancel culture,"
yeah.
But no, it's not true.
Well, I mean, like even in the South, right? Like the Bible Belt, some of this philosophy is threatening to their,
So here's the thing
dogma.
about my experience in the Bible Belt. I have been invited to dozens and dozens of churches for whom my philosophy is just fundamentally wrong. But they invite me because not to teach my Jewish philosophy, but to talk about Jesus, because Jesus is a perennial wisdom mystic.
Mhm.
And they invite me to read, to do commentary on the New Testament. And, I won't get all sidetracked in all the things that I think the New Testament says that Christians aren't taught in normal churches, but to share Christian mysticism with people. And they're like, that's part of my tradition. And that's my point. When I go to a church, I don't say, well, you're wrong, and this is what the truth is. I say, do you know your mystics? Do you have
I
any
don't think people know
idea?
what mystics mean. You know what I mean? The
Yeah,
word
right. I think
mystic.
that's true. When I use the word mystic for me is somebody who doesn't settle for a secondhand God. They don't want to read about God. They want to experience God directly. And that's true for all mystics, I would say. But in Christianity, there are these amazing Catholic and Protestant mystics, people who have this direct experience of the divine, who when they articulate both their experience and the ramifications of that experience, no longer operate in that rigid big religion or big Christianity box.
Mhm.
And all I do when I go to church is say, "Have you heard of this one? Let's talk about you know, uh, I'm trying now, I get sort of blanked out, but Julian of Norwich. Let's talk about Meister Eckhart.
Mhm.
Let's look at these amazing, whoever wrote The Cloud of Unknowing. Let's talk about these books, which their pastors don't talk about,
Mhm.
probably because they're not interested in them.
Yeah.
But when they learn about them, let's read the Gospel of Thomas, written around the same time as John, just not part of the official gospel. A lot of parallels, could be actual literal sayings of Jesus. Let's just go with that and see what it might teach
Sure.
us about Jesus. So when you go into a church, even here, and you start to share authentic Christian teachings, just that stuff they've never heard, no, they love having me come.
Yeah.
Because I'm not preaching to them. I'm just sharing parts of their tradition that, for one reason or another, has been lost to them.
Sure. Aren't we all mystics though? Like if we are a part of the creator, like why couldn't, I mean, we should be able to connect with that part of ourselves and
Yeah,
receive
we
those
should be.
messages.
Right? Most people don't want to be mystics.
Yeah.
Most people don't want to know their own divinity. They don't, because it's too much responsibility. Most people don't want to know that the person, the homeless person they just passed on the street is God. They don't want to know that. They don't want to know that the people who have a different political view than you do, or different religious view, that they're all equally divine. They don't want to know that. They just don't, because it's too frightening.
Mm-hmm.
Look, just take Judaism for a second. Mainstream Judaism. My new book is called Judaism Without Tribalism. But if you look at tribalist Judaism, it's all about the Jews. And what do we say? We say Jews are God's chosen people, that the single supernatural outside the universe guy who created the universe looked at all the peoples of the earth and said, Jewish people, they're going to be my precious people. And what did they get chosen for? They got chosen to receive the only revelation from this God, right? According to Judaism, God didn't reveal the Bhagavad Gita. God has nothing to do with the New Testament. God has nothing to do with Dhammapada or any of these other sacred texts. God only has to do with one text. It's the Hebrew Bible. So you're chosen to receive this Bible and the keys to the promised land, a deed, to the promised land that you hold in perpetuity, regardless of who's living there, when. So that's big religion in a Jewish frame. God saves some and damns everybody else. I mean, I've been told by some Southern Baptist ministers that God only saves Southern Baptists. Everyone else is going to hell. All my Methodist friends, I'll see you in hell because Jews are going there too. So that stuff falls away when you really know the divinity of self and other. And most people don't want to do that. I was once teaching, I'll keep this really short, but I was once teaching in India, which I've done 4 times now. Really great place. Mm-hmm. I love India. I was once teaching in India and I was teaching a Jewish thing there. And there were some Jewish people in the class. And I said, I made this crack about Jews being the chosen people, that what kind of God chooses people? It's simply it's a marketing thing. And there was one woman from South Africa, and she got so upset. She wasn't young. She wasn't probably in her 50s then. And she just said vehemently, she was really angry. She said, if I didn't believe that God chose the Jews from all the peoples of the earth, I wouldn't even be a Jew. I would quit. And, there's no arguing with that.
Yeah.
But it shows how intently she needed to cling to that marketing slogan that Jews are the chosen people. And the same thing is who's saved, who's damned, who's the infidel and who's the beloved of God. I mean, religions just make these divisions, and sometimes they're spiritual divisions, who's saved and who's damned. Sometimes they're social divisions, like the caste system in India. So in Hinduism, so people like to hold on to these narrow and narrowing ideas, and they don't want to know the truth. It's too scary.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like a few good men, right? You can't handle the truth.
Can't handle the truth. I mean, even to think about God being a woman, right? The divine feminine, like people they get antsy about that. But
yeah,
I mean, wasn't there a time where the divine feminine was like the major concept?
Right. There's a time when God was a woman.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then agriculture came and changed everything or something. But yeah, there was a time when God was a woman, then God was a man. We're moving into an age where, if we're going to talk in those terms, I mean, ultimately for me, God isn't gendered, but the experience of God can take on, like the bat kol, the daughter's voice, or the Shekhinah, the feminine presence of God. The experience of God can be gendered. And we've been living through, I don't know, a couple of millennia where the experience was primarily masculine, gendered masculine. And now it's becoming, the divine mother's coming back, however you want to understand that. And more people are having an experience of the divine mother in different forms, Catholic, Hindu, Jewish, whatever it is. And that's a hallmark of hope, that we're getting a more balanced experience of the divine if you need a gendered experience. And sure. I've had both.
What I love about perennialism is that it puts the responsibility on us to explore that relationship, right? Like to grow that. For me, like I love to be romantic and think about the ancient texts as being passed down from being the word of God, but it's also like I have a hard time. Like, I don't know if these guys existed. I don't know. Like, I take it on faith that this is sacred script. And it's like, how do I know this stuff is true? Right. Like, but that's going inside and like really meditating on it and know thyself and like learning the truth for myself. And I think that's why we're here. It's like, maybe, maybe our purpose here on earth is for God to know itself in an individuated form and to realize its true source of power or true essence, right? Like
Yeah.
to recognize that.
Yeah, you're raising a couple of points. I mean, the last point, that we are a way God gets to know God's own self. I think that makes a lot of sense. The scripture part, though, for me, yeah, it's been handed down, but it has a human origin, which means it has a political slant. And these texts, especially the Bible, which is so big and so sprawling and was written over centuries by different people with different agendas, the Bible is not one seamless, coherent story. So in parts of the Bible, the God character says, love your neighbor and love the stranger. And then in the book of Samuel, God says, when you go into the land, commit genocide against the 7 nations who are living there. Kill everybody, man, woman, child, cow, right? Destroy their civilization. Make no treaty with them, it says, and show them no mercy. So how can the God who says, love the stranger, then say, wipe out these people and show them no mercy?
Mm-hmm.
Either God was off his meds, or it's written by 2 different people with 2 very different understandings of what's true. And they all just get put into the same library of books. And then people take it all as literally the word of God, which is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true for any text, that these are of human origin. Now, how do you tell what's true? Because you could say, well, then it's just people writing it and it doesn't really matter. But I think you're pointing toward an important thing about, well, I think it's true. How do you know what's true? The way I look at it, and this is a whole Kabbalistic backstory, but I won't go into that, but that people operate on 5 dimensions: body, heart, mind, soul, and spirit. And that when I read a given text, when I read the genocidal text in the Bible, my body recoils, right? I feel, oh, that's terrible. My heart shrivels, my mind rebels against the idea. My soul is offended, and my spirit is just completely blocked. If I can show no mercy, I have no spirit. If I read love the stranger, my body softens, my heart opens, my mind is expanded, my soul embraces the other, and my spirit realizes that self and other are part of the same divine happening. So check your body, check your heart, check your mind, check your soul, check your spirit. See how it's responding to these texts. And my argument is when your response is one of softening and compassion, you're reading something that's true, you're hearing something that's true. But when it's all constricted and closed, you're reading something that's false, that actually goes against the truth, which is the truth of love and justice.
I could talk to you all night. How can people connect with you? How can they find out more about your material and your philosophies and your books?
Well, the easiest way, in the old days, I would say go to your local bookstore and you can find my books on the shelves. Good luck with that. But you can go to a local bookstore and order things. You can go on Amazon if you're into Amazon. You can find all my books are online. You can Google me, and there's tons of YouTube material. But basically, myself, just to get a hold of me personally, that's more difficult. I mean, I'm online. I have a website, rabbirami.com. You can reach me, but I'm pretty much a recluse. So, but if someone emails me, I almost always respond. But if someone looking for a teacher, looking for spiritual direction, which I'm very interested in and have done in the past, I'm into my 72nd year of life, and I'm looking to do less and less and focus more and more on, walking with my dog and writing books and reading other people's books than I am about, and doing this. I love doing this.
Well,
But,
man, this
taking,
is
taking on a student is not something I do anymore.
well, let me ask you this, right? And I hate to ask you this deep question with 4 minutes left in our interview, but as you get closer, 72nd year, what is your mindset towards death?
So I think what happens when you die is nothing. I think that the dying process is one of letting go of all the blocks to the truth. And in Judaism, it's called, your last breath is called the kiss of God. And the idea is in Genesis chapter 2, when God creates the first earthling, God breathes consciousness into this being. And then when you die, and that's how you're born, God, it's metaphoric. God breathes into you and you become a self-conscious divine being. When you die, you sigh and breathe that breath back into the divine. And that moment is called in Judaism the kiss of God. It's supposed to be this ecstatic awakening moment of knowing your true nature as the divine. And then it's like a wave returning to the ocean. You just go back into the process. And while God never waves you again, other waves are arising. And so the consciousness that the superior self that you are is the divine self, and that self doesn't die. What dies is the ignorant, like the ignorant ideas, the ignorant self. That's what dies when you die, and you're left with this aha moment of, oh, this is it, and then you die.
Beautiful. Rabbi, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been amazing.
Great, my pleasure. You're a lot of fun to talk with.